Hello my good people, welcome to my YouTube channel. And actually it has been so long since I posted here. I was on a break, but guys, I am back. And guys, let's do this. So guys, I want to introduce a new series and I will call it the African Folder. So in this series I will discuss Africa in comparison to other continents and other regions of the world. And today I want to bring you the first episode. So these discussions will consist of political comparisons, economic comparisons, and everything to do with Africa. So guys, I want to introduce and bring to you my first episode, the economic disparity between Africa and the West, and the legacy of colonization or the legacy of colonialism, and how Africans can change the narrative and stop depending on the West. Very sweet. To start with, Africa, the cradle of humanity, is home to vast natural resources, rich cultures, and brilliant minds. Yet, it remains economically marginalized and globally dependent, while the West enjoys unprecedented growth and influence. This situation is not coincidental. It stems from centuries of exploitation, structural manipulation, and a distorted global narrative that undermines African power. Today, I will not only explore how colonialism and neocolonialism contributed to Africa's underdevelopment, but also I will challenge Africans to shift the narrative, to rise, reclaim sovereignty, and build continental superiority by breaking dependency on Western systems. To start with, let me talk about the colonial activities and economic foundations. Colonialism was a systematic project of extraction. European nations invaded Africa not to civilize it, but to exploit it. They extracted resources like minerals, agricultural products, and labor, while disrupting indigenous governance, economies, and cultures. Now let us discuss the impact of colonial activities in Africa. And we will start with economic impact. So one of the economic impact of colonial activities is that infrastructure was built for extraction, not just to improve Africa or for development. Another impact is that African economies were restructured to export one or two products, e.g. cocoa, copper, causing long-term economic vulnerability. Indigenous industries were banned and starved of investment, forcing dependency on imported goods from Europe. Colonial activities also had some political impacts, which included traditional governance was replaced with foreign systems that favored collaborationist elites. Again, artificial borders grouped or split ethnic communities, sparking civil conflicts, which are still seen today. Colonial activities, they also had some social impacts, which included the colonial education system taught Africans about Shakespeare and Napoleon but erased the legacy of Shaka Zulu or Mansa Musa. They were not sharing any legacy associated with Africans. Another impact, religions and local traditions were either demonized or co-opted to suit colonial agendas, causing identity confusion post-independence. Let's also discuss the issue of mental colonization and the African mindset. Even after independence, Africa was not free. The West switched from chains to psychology, manipulating African minds through education, religion, aid, and media. On the case of media and education, African children are still taught using British or French curriculum, learning more about European wars than their own civilizations. On the case of media shows Africa as poor and disparate, reinforcing inferiority, complexity, and dependency. Turning on to religion and hate, some important religious doctrines taught poverty as a virtue and suffering as salvation, dulling the will to resist exploitation. Foreign aid discouraged self-reliance. It undermined local industries by flooding markets with free or subsidized goods. As a result, Africans began to view Western products, ideas, and leadership as superior, a mental surrender more dangerous than physical colonization. Now let us discuss the corporate power in the West and in the Africa. As at today, a major driver of Western power is the dominance of their corporations, which creates jobs, influence policy, and innovate continuously. Some of the Western giants that I'm talking about include the Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Tesla. This shapes global culture, controls data, and generates trillions in wealth. When we come into African giants, we have the Dangote Group in Nigeria, the Safaricom of Kenya, and the MTN of South Africa. They are important but regionally limited, often relying on Western technology or financing. This has created core differences between Western corporates and the African giants. These differences include that African companies serve mostly local markets. Again, African giants rely on imports for machinery and technology. And lastly, African giants face poor infrastructure. Now let us discuss why Africa remains dependent. Number 1, it is due to weak institutions. Africa's post-independence governments inherited colonial-style bureaucracies that were not built for citizen empowerment but for extraction and control. This resulted in centralized authority, fragile checks and balances, and minimal public accountability. In many states, leaders are always above the law. Elections are manipulated and opposition is suppressed, weakening democracy. Weak institutions lead to mismanagement of resources and rampant corruption. Government funds often disappear into personal accounts, and public projects stall or fail due to lack of oversight. Investors avoid such environment, causing capital flight, low foreign direct investment, and a standard local private sector. Citizens lose trust in government services like education, healthcare, and justice systems. This discourages civic engagement and promotes empathy or even rebellion. Weak institutions also fail to protect vulnerable populations, exacerbating inequality and unrest. Second reason why Africa remains dependent is due to Western control of global finance. The International Monetary Fund, that is the IMF, and the World Bank were created and are controlled by Western powers, especially the US and European countries. Their lending decisions often impose structural adjustment programs, SAPs, which pressure African governments to cut public spending, privatize services, and open markets, often leading to loss of national sovereignty in policymaking. SAPs have historically led to reduced investment in public infrastructure, healthcare, and education. Countries become trapped in cycles of borrowing and debt repayment, leaving little for development. Africa pays billions annually in debt servicing, money that could otherwise fight poverty, build industry, or educate the youth. Austerity measures demanded by these institutions often cause price hikes, job losses, and the removal of essential subsidies. This disproportionately affects the poor, igniting protests and undermining social cohesion. Local cultures and priorities are sidelined in favor of Western economic models that don't always fit African contexts. Another reason why Africa remains dependent is due to extractive trade models. During colonialism, Africa was integrated into the global economy as a source of raw material. That model remains intact today. Trade agreements are often skewed in favor of Western countries. African leaders who try to negotiate better terms are sometimes marginalized or even overthrown with foreign backing. Africa exports raw materials like cocoa, oil, and copper, and imports finished products at a higher cost. This stifles local manufacturing and industrialization, keeping countries dependent on foreign technology and jobs. Global corporations dominate key sectors like mining and agriculture, extracting profit and sending it abroad. There is a little value addition within African communities. Youth remain unemployed or underemployed because there are few local industries. Communities in resource-rich areas suffer from pollution, displacement, and poor working conditions without receiving the true benefits of their land's wealth. Another reason is brain drain. Poor governance, insecurity, and lack of political will to invest in intellectual talent push the brightest minds out. Professionals such as doctors, engineers, and academics flee to stable Western countries where their voices and talents are better appreciated and compensated. Africa spends billions training professionals in universities only for them to work abroad, benefiting foreign economies. The continent loses not just money but also potential innovations and businesses these individuals could have created at home. Brain drain weakens key sectors like healthcare and education. In many African countries, there is a shortage of qualified personnel in hospitals and schools. The youth begin to see leaving the continent as the only path to success, further eroding confidence in local progress. So guys, I want to end this episode 1 at this point. And in our next episode, we will discuss about changing the narrative and the path to African superiority. How we can change this narrative and make Africa a superpower, a supercontinent. So guys, bye, and don't forget to subscribe and like and comment on my videos. Share my videos with your friends, and guys, meet you in our next episode. So guys, bye.